Bet on your tiny, tiny castle. Bet on your tiny, tiny dream. Bet on your tiny, tiny business.
Hello. This is the live recording of episode 7 of the I Like My Tea Sweet podcast, created by Aysha and Rain as part of the collective work of TINYisPOWERFul. Today's episode will be uploaded to YouTube and SoundCloud, and all episodes are easily accessible and available at tinyispowerful.com/podcasts.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Aysha, one of the collaborators of I Like My Tea Sweet, a podcast experiment focused on issues, topics, and memories related to Charleston and the greater area. Today is the 3rd episode of a 5-episode series where we explore the 5 House: mental, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual. We want everyone to get the most out of this conversation, so we would like for everyone to list what comes to mind when you think about your emotions or emotional health. You can respond publicly in the chat or in the comments or privately in a personal journal. And as always, this is a conversation, so all are encouraged to engage and participate by asking and answering questions with our guest hosts. Today's focus is on emotional health, and Rain and I are your hosts today.
Should we introduce ourselves, or I'm unsure if we should or not.
If you want to.
I'm going to opt out of that.
Alrighty. So the first question is, what is emotional health to you?
Well, personally for myself, emotional health is kind of a subculture of mental health, because all emotions come from the mind, in my opinion. So I see it as a part that you handle with trying to handle when it comes to mental health as well.
Emotional health to me is similar to what you said, but it's really like everything I feel. Basically, I imagine it as like all my 5 senses just combined into one, and it just plays a part. Because with every emotion, when you're angry, you can be like, you feel hot or you look red or things like that.
Hello, Anastasia.
Hello. Oh, hi, Ariel. That's great. We're just kind of that we just started with the opening question, so maybe Aysha or Rain, you could re-invite the question.
So, what is emotional health to you?
So I thought it was really interesting that Rain made the connection between emotions and the mind, and Aysha made the connection between emotions and the body. And I don't know if I had ever even, made that connection until right now. So for me, my emotional health, I guess when I think about my emotional health, I associate it with like emotions and feeling, so like if I'm feeling sad or if I'm feeling happy. So I kind of gauge my emotional health currently, my point of reference. And I look at my body too, because if I'm feeling low, I sometimes can recognize that because of like I sleep or mental, we say like I'm not as motivated. So yeah, I guess it's a combination of things, but sometimes I just check in on my happiness, my sadness, my joy and stuff.
And then the second question is like, you know how we always talk about your emotional health and like understanding your emotional health and what it is, but we really don't talk about what are emotions. So what are emotions?
This is going to sound like really like weird or crazy, but I've been reading this book called Why Buddhism is True. I can't quite remember the author right now, but one thing that stuck with me when they talked about like emotions and feeling is they kind of made it something that was outside of us as a person, which it sounds really weird in retrospect, but a good chunk of the book is about talking about not self, and not self distances us from those emotions, such as mindfully looking at them and not integrating them into who we are as a person.
I think that that's something to strive for, but I haven't read the book, but I would also say that accepting and acknowledging emotions without necessarily, I guess I'm saying you don't want to attach bad things. If you're feeling sad, yes, the goal would be able to like acknowledge the sadness over there and then still be within, you know, taking care of business. But also, you know, sometimes it doesn't happen that way. And like you talked about Buddhism, and I've taken a few meditation classes, and one of the kind of practices they talked about was kind of like that. Like, you know, when you're in meditation, the objective would be kind of the absence of thought, even, right?
I would
And
have to disagree with that.
okay.
I think now a lot of people who are writing about meditation are not saying it's not the absence of thought, but acknowledging that the thought is there and not getting engaged with the thought.
Yeah, again, as the goal, but also being able to like have grace and gentleness to realize that it's really aspirational to be able to acknowledge a thought as a thought, is the goal, or a goal. And again, that's just, it's like that. I think the thing with any of this, or unlike, I guess, physical health, which like talking about exercises and the proper form and stuff, that's like a little bit more tangible and a little bit more concrete. And then getting into that kind of mental / emotional self, or self, and I think a lot of that is unique to the individuals, even more so than physical movement.
And I think emotions to me is like how we're able, they're adjectives on how we can describe the state of whatever like we're in. And like I can say like I'm frustrated at my schoolwork because sometimes I am, and I can address the fact that I am frustrated, and like it might be like I might be frustrated, I might have a little bit of anxiety to it, and when I can describe it, it's like, uh-oh, my mic is time. Can you guys hear me now?
I can still hear you.
I can hear you.
All right. But like I was saying, with emotions, I'm able to describe what state I'm actually in, so I won't be confused, because I can say like I'm actually frustrated at the schoolwork. I'm not frustrated at life itself. It might be just the schoolwork.
So like recognizing causes. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say emotions to me are just, I don't think of them as just things that we feel, but of also a way of expression in general. whether that be creative or a way to connect with others as well. I feel that sometimes when there's not words, you can express and connect with humans or people, or even like pets, animals, purely through emotions, purely through a feeling, something, whether it's through an inspiration, whether it's through, you know, those things that we typically identify with, like anger, sadness. But I think of it as just also connection and embrace.
I think I agree a lot with like Aysha's assessment of like emotion when she says, where she tacks like a reason on to like that emotion. So I'm not frustrated at life, I'm frustrated at schoolwork. And I like that approach to emotions because it helps rationalize it. Like I don't think everything and any like everything should be rationalized, but it's great to be able to say this is a point where this is coming from. And that personally helps me when it comes to like meditating and reflecting in the moment. So for instance, if I'm like extremely aggravated, I'm like, why am I aggravated? Like, is it because of this reason on the surface, or is there like a deeper reason under the surface? And then I see that this aggravation is actually from a different emotion. So like, what is your thoughts on like, when it comes to looking at an emotion and realizing that it's spawning from like a different emotion, kind of like the those Russian dolls where, you know, you open it up and then there's another one inside there. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
That's pretty interesting, that concept. I do think our connections are layered, I guess, in a sense. It kind of makes me think of critical thinking. It makes me think of the unconscious mind, because our emotions, not only are they shared connection, but I feel like our emotions are also attached to our systems of belief. So whatever, if I'm angry because someone bumped into me while walking and didn't say excuse me, my mind is trained to be angry with that because of a connection that I make to maybe my childhood when I was taught. You know, so on the surface I might be feeling angry, but why? You know, or maybe someone bumps into you and it triggers you because maybe someone was abused. You know, it attaches to other thoughts or feelings, these system of beliefs, these things that have been programmed into us. So it is, in fact, I agree, where it's layered, because there's not just one thought to that emotion that you're feeling in the moment. And that emotion might lead to another emotion. Maybe I'm angry, but then in the same token, I become sad because I make a connection to a past event. That makes sense.
So then my question would be, you know, in the moment when and I love the example of like maybe someone bumping into you causes a feeling of anger for multi-layered or any combination of reasons. And so in the moment, how do you kind of separate that from whatever your response is? 'Cause, like, that's another thing. There's like the kind of cause or the source, and then the emotion, and then the like how we respond.
I think that really just depends on where you are in the moment, you know. I don't think there's going to be one general answer to that, because maybe I think about like the movement, the things that are taking place in our nation right now. There's so many different emotions and feelings and so many chains of events that's taking place. There's not just one emotion to feel at any given time right now. But say, for example, you know, I wanted to focus on how I felt about the response to Breonna Taylor court case. I think it depends on where, you know how they say meet people where they are? I think it's the same thing with yourself, because if I had no background or understanding of the situation or history or any connections to the case at all, or not understanding how, say, you know, the Black community may feel and why, then my reaction is going to be different. My response is going to be different to a white man bumping into me on the street versus, now versus before Breonna Taylor and all these other things that have taken place right now. Maybe if I was in college and not thinking about the rest of the world, my response might be different to say a white man bumping into me on the street then, because in that time, my mindset isn't where it is now. I didn't recognize what might have triggered those emotions, if there were any, so I really think that, again, is an individual thing. And even for yourself, it's where your mindset is at in that moment, where you are in your life.
I find that really interesting. And here's why. It feels like for a long time, emotions were labeled as really illogical and very like not rational things. So it was like, hey, you need to not show your emotion, you need to not express negative emotions. And I like the idea of meeting yourself where you're at. It's like saying, this is valid, this, you are allowed to feel this way even if you can't rationalize it or completely reflect on it at this moment. What are, like, when you think about how we've been like taught to cover up emotions, what is your like thought process or thought on that? And this is an open question.
So I was taught by my grandmama that I have to feel what I feel, because if I hold on to it, it's not going to be something good. It'll turn into worse. But if I express my emotions and tell people how I feel, it'll not only be better for me, but it'll be better for them, because they'll understand me. And when you understand my emotions and you understand some of my actions or why I do certain things. And she also made sure to teach me to tell people, well, to be very vocal about triggers and what triggers you to either be a good person or a bad person, she would say.
I have, I think throughout my life, been kind of naturally expressive about my feelings and my emotions. And one of the challenges that I've encountered is like an after effect of if I communicate emotions or triggers to someone because I trust them or because I care about them or, I want them to be aware. If that, then sometimes what happens is that person doesn't necessarily respond in a way that I feel like is with sensitivity toward my emotions. And then now I've got to handle that and that's where that phrase comes, like, my feelings are hurt, and that's like, and then I guess I could go back to the emotion of what emotion is that associated with. But so I think my two answers are that I've always been comfortable to express it, but I also feel sometimes disappointment associated with how that expression is received.
I think it's interesting because I think we do live in a culture where it's kind of split. I think now people are it's being suggested that we express ourselves more vocally. There are a lot of people, think about it this way, where you have so many different communities that may be within one community, and people are speaking out more and identifying, and that has to do with their identity as well. There's just so many, our community, our world is so perplexed right now. So people are being more outspoken. Whereas, 10, 20 years ago, people, women, just depending on your social status, you were taught to suppress. Like, even in the job force right now, I feel like I'm still taught to suppress my emotions, because if I speak out and honestly, then I'm viewed a certain way. Oh, you're a B, you're either unintelligent or just angry woman, versus I'm just expressing how I feel because what you did affected me, or I feel what you did affected someone else, and this is how it made me feel. Or even just saying things like, I don't understand. There's a lot of judgment, because even in the workforce, sometimes even at home, there's a hierarchy system, and depending on where you fall under that hierarchy is where you're allowed to express yourself. So I think that still exists in our community, depending on your socioeconomic status. But I think we still have an opportunity where we can express ourselves more freely. But a lot of people, where it's so ingrained, we won't, And it just depends on the time and the place, because there's still many spaces where it's not allowed. Even say, for example, I go to a community meeting where we're all supposed to have equal ground and be able to express ourselves. If I'm in a room, I'll just say I've been in a situation where I was with a conscious community group, and there were so many conscious men and women, but it was okay as long as the conscious men spoke. The women were just supposed to agree. And I think that's still a culture here. There's still some type of hierarchy system, no matter which way you look at it, what community you belong to, or what you identify with. So it's easy for you to suppress your thoughts, your emotions. They're all connected, simply because of how we've been taught to think in this nation.
If I could just include, you just gave a million words that I wanted to snap at all of it. And the only thing I would tag on is, so the connotation of, if you express certain emotions, then you're aggressive, or you're a stereotype. There's also, I've experienced that the expressing of emotions in general, but especially expressions of emotions like sadness or anger or disappointment, are associated with weakness, and as a woman, I'm constantly out here in the world, proving my strength. And I think that expressing the emotions can add to that. But again, sometimes the encounter, and we can say it's cultural, we can say it's in generationally ingrained, in our biological memories, but I would love to see that fade away, the idea that expressing emotions is weakness.
That actually makes me think of, funnily enough, a meme. So it's become people have turned becoming offended into a meme, and at first glance it seems like really harmless. It seems like fun, haha. But then when you look at it subconsciously, it's like you're making fun of somebody expressing discomfort or unease at an idea, or saying, hey, this offended me, and then you're making fun of that, the emotion of being offended. Like what's the thought on that,
I'm sorry to be late, and maybe my head is still not totally in what you are talking about, but I'm very happy to see you all here. Anastasia, it has been a long time. Aysha, it has been a long time. Rain, it has been a long time. Only Victoria, we still have personal conversation pretty often. So just emotions, I always have a delay for me. That's what I would say. I have a delay, and I cannot improvise. Yeah, emotions, if I am in a public, in a party or something, I can just blush and have nothing to say. I'm blank out. And that has happened all my youth, all in school, all thing, until I found a way to deal with all that, which was, if I have an emotion, this is perfectly fine. I need to be able to analyze it and talk about it almost at the same time. So it takes long, because instead of screaming, I have to scream and say, I scream because something, and it can take room where finally you are just stop talking. That was how I could deal with my emotions. So it's rare now that I am in this type of situation, although it has happened last year a few times.
And I think
I was just going to say, I think when you go back to that comment about offending, I think it's interesting because, like she was mentioning, blushing in a party, and being able to express yourself. Sometimes I think that there's pros and cons to having so many different identities in our present time, because now, no matter what you do, you're going to offend somebody one way or another. And depending on who that person is, where you're at, it depends on how people respond to your offense, even if you're not trying to. I could sneeze, or somebody sneeze, and I say, bless you, I think, or hey, I look at somebody and say, I think you look wonderful today, and they may be offended, and maybe that may not be my intention, but that word offended, you're going to offend somebody somewhere, sometime, no matter what you do. And I think because of that too, we're so focused on that half the time that it also forces us to kind of suppress emotions that we may have and want to share with people openly, because now I got to worry if what I say is going to offend you. And, when you talk about that meme, it kind of makes me think, well, it just depends on who's on the receiving end and who's on the opposite end, but everybody's going to be offended at some point in time.
And if we could normalize saying and acknowledging, okay, well, that offended me because, and if that was just normal, then if the person, especially if their intention was not offense, then that's an opportunity for possibly some enriched dialogue.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Oh, sorry. And then it's also like how we react to somebody saying how they're offended. Because with some people, I could say like I'm offended, and then next thing you know, they try and gaslight the situation onto them, or say like, you feel offended, here's how I feel offended. It's not a tick for tack. If I say I feel offended about something, understand that, and then like you say, we can go into a rich dialogue, and I can maybe understand why you feel offended, and I can be considerate of you.
And I think a part of it is just, I have to agree with you guys. It's just like, don't brush it off, address it. Like when you address things, 9 times out of 10, the situation can improve. So if you're like having a conversation and you're like, that offended me, and here's why. Like if you give the reason why it offended you, and then the person, instead of like laughing it off or making it about themselves, says, hey, this offended you, let's talk about it, because we all have different experiences. As Anastasia said, you may do something that offends somebody else, but if we make it normal to say that offended me and then have a dialogue around that in turn, I think that would, sorry, my brain, that in turn would make communicating about things that make us uncomfortable or that make us feel a sense of dis-ease better, in a sense.
I think for me, the easier is to talk, converse only with people I really work with. Because if not, it's a world of different people, and everybody is pleased and offended at the same time. If we think of what we have in our mind, we have more than one thing at the same time. So to be able to really talk about that with someone and think you need to know so much before whatever you are going to say, it's meaningful. But again, also, and I agree, I think Anastasia, you were saying that, I come from a culture where the woman was not supposed to be publicly weak. If that woman wanted to be able to be at the same level as the men, and for talking, for whatever, studying or whatever opportunities, let's say. So I have been raised with that. And he didn't mind if I was going to remain a woman in the weak meanings of that. But then I had to prepare myself to be dependent, not independent.
I think it's really interesting because, just like this whole conversation about identifying what emotions are to you, even that very word, weak or strength, it's all an individual thought. So I almost feel like no matter what, at the end of the day, we can only be responsible for and completely understand our own emotions and thought process. And if we take ownership of that, even when it comes to looking at a culture where we may be viewed as weak or strong or whatnot, just like and when it comes to our art, whatever our perception is one thing and somebody else is going to have a different perception. But if we take ownership of our own feelings and emotions and realize that, well, this is what I view as a strength. And if my strength is showing my emotions, I don't want to offend you, but I'm going to use that as my strength and not allow you to control how I respond to it because you feel it's weak, I think everything is just based on our own mindset. Like I was saying earlier, meet people where they are, meet you where you are, and how your initial responses, your emotions, everything is connected to. It's all going to be based on your mindset in the present.
I kind of personally think that I don't know how anyone else would react to this, but I think that looking at your emotions and seeing how they make you feel should be something that we should be taught to do at a young age. And I feel like there's that disconnect because, well, if we're not taught this, we're not going to teach our children this. So it's like, when do we begin saying, okay, sitting down with kids and be like, how is this making you feel? Instead of looking at a tantrum and be like, because as a child, my tantrums were looked at as I didn't have lots of tantrums, one or two, but they were looked at as disobedience and being unruly. So we look at those and say, how can we better emotionally teach people how to deal with those things?
That is so, wow, that's just mind blowing because all I can think about when you say that, my first initial reaction was oh my goodness, if people were to actually do that, there would be no opportunity for therapists. You're taking away jobs. But on a serious note, though, imagine if we were taught to understand and identify emotions, which of course is going to be different at different stages in our life. But if we're allowed that opportunity, how much of a difference do you think it would make what's mental health in our communities right
now? I think that it would bridge a lot of gaps. I think it would also help us to objectively look at mental health. So we look at, say, where are these feelings coming from? When you're able to do that, you're able to see these are where those emotions are coming from. This is where I need help, or this is where I feel like I'm okay. I think it would change the game, to be honest. I mean, I don't think it would put people out of jobs because, life happens. You still need someone to talk to about it. But I think it would better help us be grounded and better help us understand ourselves.
And to the part of the question that was, at what point do we start? I mean, I have a very young child. She's 13 going on 14 months, and she can't respond to me. Words and language are all still new to her. They don't carry definitions really yet, especially the words associated with emotions. Sometimes, though, what I'll try to do, this is just me personally, is I'll ask her. So she's already started with and I'm trying to figure out where is this coming from. So I'll go through, are you sleepy? Are you hungry? Are you frustrated? I'll ask her, this tiny person, we'll go through the questions while she is I don't know how long I'll have the patience for that, but I'm just saying that even even at that very young age, I'm trying to train myself to give her space to find expressing herself. Who knows? I'm a first-time parent. This could be totally wrong. I am not an expert at all.
I think it's awesome, and I think you mentioned what are they called? I feel statements earlier, and like you were talking about how if we were taught to be able to express ourselves and then receive that information as well, openly, it'd be interesting. If we were taught from a young age to do those things, what would be the feeling in our communities right now? How would we be responding to it? I agree with Rain that it would be totally different, and I think in a sense, especially if we're focused on our emotions and listening to people, because it will train the way that we listen and hear things. But I think that it would also force us to look at people as that and beyond just the exterior. Because now I got to make a connection with you that's deeper and actually hear you out. I can't just look at you anymore. I got to listen.
I think what I've seen so far, like, what I mean by RC. So, I was a teacher cadet for my school before I left, before quarantine, and we had the opportunity to go on a field trip to observe James Simmons and Meminger. And what I saw was there was like a timeout station, but it wasn't really like, oh, you're in timeout, you don't get to do anything. But it was timeout stations like when you feel overwhelmed, stressed, and like when you're feeling a certain emotion, they had certain sensory items for them. Like if they felt frustrated and they wanted to squeeze something, they had little squeezy balls to have. And they literally have just a certain space just for them. And I think that's a way of helping right now. And hopefully it moves on to like high school and college. Hopefully, I'm wishing that they had timeout stations for high schoolers and college students.
Right, like a self-awareness, self-check station, as opposed to like in-school suspension. Let's just like rename it, reframe it, reshape the room. That sounds awesome.
And I think to answer your questions, Victoria, is very different from a mother point of view, where maybe it's not what is the best for my kid, but what you want is to develop a relationship with that kid. And so you have an input, and the kid has an input, and you can see and change it over the years and over the time. When you are a teacher, though, that's different. The question is different. And depending on the age and on the situation and on all the wrong perceptions of who is a good kid and who is a bad kid, who is a good student or not, that has to be really seen in a really different type of, in a fighting situation in a way, in a challenging situation, which with your kid, it doesn't matter in a way how you treat that kid, as long as you develop a good communication.
I love how you said relationship because I think you're absolutely right with that. I thought it made me when we shifted the conversation about how a child would feel and developing that relationship, it made me think how different would my relationship be with certain adults in my life if I wasn't taught that whole child should be seen and not heard. If they give me the opportunity to actually express what I was feeling and not doubt my intellect or my feeling being valid. What would it look like? What would it be like? Now, not to say that they were completely wrong, but I feel like there's more to that context of that. A child should be seen and not heard in this situation, or maybe this is how they need to participate. There should have been more to it. But when you're taught to be silent, the relationship you have with the person that's teaching that is different. The way that you interact with other people, those interpersonal relationships is all totally different when you're taught that. So it's interesting. I like how you mentioned relationship. It does affect them. I'm taught not to talk to people or express people, then what? How am I going to develop relationships beyond parameters of my home?
I agree with that. And I was thinking about like, yes, I'm officially on my own now. I'm officially an adult, and I'm seeing the differences that I have with my mom, because she was kind of on a child should be seen and not heard type thing. But then I was like, I'm thinking about our relationship, and it's like we have to start over again because I'm not a child anymore. I'll always be a child, yes, mama, but I'm not a child anymore. It's like our relationship is kind of detached from what we were. And I'm wondering, like, how are we doing this again? Like, do I say, like, hi, my name is Aysha and I feel like this and that? Or, like, how do you, I don't know if I'm making sense, but, like, how do you start a relationship over with someone that you know, but it really feels like a stranger based off of the emotional control that you have with them? Hopefully that made sense with that.
I think a huge part of it is that in previous generations, authoritarian parenting was suggested in order to create discipline and supposedly independence. But what it ended up doing was creating dependence and, as you described, creating two different relationships. But as we're moving more towards an like authoritative rather than an authoritarian parenting style, I believe that will kind of bridge that, such as like parents and children will be able to transform into a different relationship rather than have that direct break. So I think that the change in parenting styles will kind of alleviate that.
I like that. I also think a part of it too is, especially if you're trying to start over or change the way a relationship looks or is with another person, something that's already been established, it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be something that happens overnight. But I think it goes back to that whole you where you're at, you got to meet them where they're at too, and maybe get into a place of comfort on their comfort level and yours, and then try to find a way to express. I don't want to say harshly. It really just depends on the person. You have to be able to feel out and understand. If it's your mom, for example, you know how to approach her. You know that if you come, for me, for example, I'm vertically challenged. Y'all all know that. So if you're a tall person and you come towards me, even if you're not raising your voice, but you're coming and standing over me, I'm going to feel threatened. But if we're sitting down on the same level, I'm more likely to open up and communicate with you. So you got to kind of find a comfort level for each party to participate in the conversation in order to start changing that relationship.
So I suppose a question that I have is, how does everyone here reflect on their emotions? Because I liked like what Aysha talked about, having those spaces to have that time to reflect. And part of me feels like that's not something that's like encouraged in everyday life. Like we're taught to like either suppress it in that moment or to just let it out and then just continue as if like nothing happened, so that to continue the machine cranking. And so how do we like reflect in the moment? How do we like tell others that, hey, like, so I guess one question is, how do we reflect in that moment and then just continue and then save time to reflect on it again? And then how do we say, hey, I need to pause. I can't be a clog in the machine at this moment. I need to stop turning right now in that way. Like, how do we like embed that into society,
I don't have a current practice for that in the moment pause, and I would love some suggestions for that. I will say that a practice that I have, and I've had it a long time and it changes, is journaling. And so sometimes it happens at night. Sometimes it happens spontaneously when I have a moment alone in the day. But I have I have a million notebooks, a work notebook, and like just a million notebooks. But I have one that specifically, I use it for like dreams and emotions. And I just that's like my private journal. And I also have occasionally I've documented emotions in other ways with the recording feature of my telephone or a video, whatever tools I have. I will just document what I'm feeling and the circumstances around it. Sometimes nothing ever happens with that documentation, except for in the moment, a form of catharsis or slowing it down and analyzing. Other times I find myself going back and listening or going back and reading myself. And sometimes I identify my own personal action items after the fact. Now that I've gotten it all out in one place, and now I have an opportunity to go back and revisit it and with the rational mind determine if there are action steps needed, or if it's something that has officially now been released and I can continue moving forward.
I want to really support what you say in the sense I did journal maybe until 20-year-old. And those where I left them and even brought like many other papers, left them at the apartment of my parents. And when they had to move, my mother called me and said, we found those things from you. And it's, I don't know, those are personal and things like that. What do you want us to do? And maybe I was 24, 25 at the most. I said, just throw them away. And I still regret it. So don't do that. Don't do that. Because that's the source for explaining yourself, even 40 years later, you know. And also for some people I had not seen for 30 years. How did I meet them? What was really, why did we go apart? Why stuff like that? Why I regret that for my dad? Why I could not, that's again some little seeds for thinking further, and I don't have them. The roots have been cut.
I like those concepts. You mentioned journaling. You can ask my uncle, my sister. I have a habit sometimes, especially when you're talking about in the moment. I had notebooks everywhere, so a journal would be great. But I think also identifying what a journal looks like, because I've learned for me it's not always just writing something specific. Maybe I want to draw a picture. I have created like a safe space in my mind that nobody else can come to unless I invite them. So say I am in the midst of something and I'm frustrated. I try now to go to that happy place, but I do like a human barometer check. What am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this way? What can I do in the moment? Who's it for? It is just a good time for me to really release this emotion in this way. And it goes back to being open and honest. You have to say, like you said, Rain earlier, excuse me, I need just a moment. I'll think about the situation where I am sorry, just a moment. All right, on the console. Sorry, we're traffic. But I'll think of it from co-teachers, for example. I think that as far as making a shift in society and being able to express in the moment that maybe you need to take 5. In a situation like that where your co-teachers, I think, you have to express up front, hey, while we're going to be here together on a consistent basis, I think it's important for you to know what may affect me this way and vice versa, and how I might respond. And maybe even identifying your responses or your triggers so that you're aware of it. You have to create a sense of awareness for those emotions and how you respond to things, so that maybe you can help check each other that makes sense, you know. But I think awareness, self-awareness, and awareness of others is one way to kind of make that shift in society where we're able to say, allow me some time if I need it, or allow me this moment to express myself because it's needed, it's necessary, and that needs to be accepted.
I'm recently learning how to be more selfish towards my feelings, like how I feel and my mental health. So, like when I reflect right then and there, that's what I tend to always do now. But when I reflect right then and there, like if I'm feeling overwhelmed or I'm stressed out, I'll literally just stop everything I'm doing. I'll write down how I feel, and then I'll literally rewrite my day and like be like, okay, so this is my schedule for the day because I feel this way. So if it means like I have to like, I don't ask for an extension. I notify people that I'm taking the extension on certain things. Like if they require me to do something, I'm just gonna take the extension. And then I also try to change the environment that I'm in. So typically right now it's music. So if I'm feeling a certain way, I'm gonna listen to some gospel and hopefully that uplifts me and help me feel better. So I think that's what I'm doing right now.
I actually had a coworker at my job say, if you need to take a breather, just say I need to get some water, and like we all like simultaneously understand that, oh, this person is feeling overwhelmed right now, so that's why they're getting the water. So I really liked that because it's like water has a lot of good symbolism to it, and it's also we need it for our bodies. So to say I need to get some water, saying not only am I like depleted physically, I'm depleted mentally, and I just need y'all to like just back away for a moment, or just allow me to process for a moment. And I think that we kind of need cues like that. Like if we have these cues where everybody like sees that and they're like, this is what this is understood as, then I believe that would help.
The beauty in what you just offered, I feel, is that even if other people are not aware of the cue, that's like a self cue that no one could argue with because we need water. So that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing it.
Well, everyone, we are approaching, I believe, 6 o'clock. So are there any like last remarks, um, or dialogues?
I just want to say thank y'all for allowing me to be a part of the conversation. And this is actually kind of food for thought. And it's actually kind of a continuation of a conversation that we've been having within our family unit, identifying emotions and acknowledging things that we've suppressed for so long, even without realizing it. So I appreciate it and your thoughts on how we can do that. I've definitely taken some things from this conversation, like I need some water, and journal and getting back to that. That's really important. Thank you.
Alrighty, so we would like to thank you all for being a part of today's discussion. We really appreciate that you all have taken the time out of your day to be a part of this conversation.
I'm sorry to have missed almost the full first part, so not being totally into it or meaningful in answers. But thank you. Thank you. It was a good surprise.
I would say I've been very happy to see all of you here today, and to like better understand your take on emotions, how to reflect and deal with them both internally and externally, and both personally and society within the greater society.
And I would just also say thank you all for sharing in this space. Thank you all for your parts in creating this space. And I'm looking forward to more.
All right, friends, I'm going to end out the recording with our outro. All right. Do you live in Charleston or the greater area? Well, if you do, we'd love for you to host a future episode of I Like My Tea Sweet, a podcast about issues and topics surrounding our community. For more information or to offer suggestions, email TINYisPOWERFUL@gmail.com. You can also respond or add to today's conversation about emotional health by sending your thoughts via the Something to Share section of TINYisPOWERFUL.com.
Tiny auto shop. Yeah, your tiny flower shop. You need to bet on them just like they bet on you. You need to bet on them just like they bet on you. They bet the sweat on your sweat, child. They bet their heart on your heart now. They bet their life on your life, child. They bet their house on your house, child.